subject of Native American transportation is particularly interesting to me, how they got from one place to another. And one of the things that they depended on probably most, at least in the woodland areas where I live, was the dugout canoe. Now, dugout canoe is just what it sounds like. It was a long log and it was dug out using various methods. My dear friend and mentor Jerry Wagner, who passed away quite a while ago now, replicated many Native American wooden artifacts that no longer exist, but from descriptions that he had. And he did a dugout canoe, and I forget how long it took him.
It's traditional, and archaeologically they know that 1,700 years ago that Indians in the Great Lakes were using a craft like this, and it was probably at least 1,200 years before the birch bark canoe that's so romanticized now, that they used this as opposed to that. It's made out of white pine, and these are white cedar paddles. And it's an exact replica of one that was unearthed in some old copper mine places in the UP. So it would be known that 1,700 years ago they used this craft in what is now Michigan.
And this one took you how long to make?
It took 46 hours, and it was done. I keep track of how long it takes to see how much energy they put into their artifacts. So this was 46 hours, and it was done with a steel axe. So I had to extrapolate a little there on time, and then it was done with birch bark and twigs and fired up and then scraped out like they did it. But they could take this dugout in 46 hours, and it was something that they could use for possibly 1,500 years, or 15 years for their family and gathering wild rice and whatever. So it was a good item for them to use in their culture. Okay. Want to go over to the other?
But he did it actually the way they would have done it, with stone tools and with fire. And I think it took him like maybe 4 or 5 days to complete. But he was always fascinated by the fact that in 4 or 5 days he had a vessel that in those ancient times would have lasted maybe his lifetime, taken care of properly. So when you consider the man hours that he put into that, the transportation was much, much more economical than transportation today, for sure. The dugout canoes were popular where immense trees grew near the water's edge. Now, I have seen photographs, and I've seen one in person. There are quite a few examples of the ancient dugouts that have been found in the muck and stuff by the waterways, where it has been sealed in and the bacteria doesn't get into totally rotted away. So they are rare, but there are probably about, well, I don't know how many in existence, but there are a good number of them in existence. So, but at any rate, they were sturdier and more durable than the bark canoe. And late in the fall, a circle of clay was applied near the base of the chosen tree, and a fire started just below the clay. When the tree had been burned for a few inches, the charred portion was scraped away with sharp stone tools, celts, grooved axes, or sharp bones. And this process was repeated until the tree finally fell. It was very labor-intensive taking the tree down, it would seem. But the branches and bark were then removed, and the fallen tree was left to season. And in the spring, the log was rolled over to the water's edge, where a large fire would have been built. The log was reduced to the desired length by the charring and scraping process. And to hollow out the inside of the log, the Indians burned a long hole down the length of the tree. They continued charring and scraping until the dugout was the right shape and often only an inch thick. So one end of the boat was always pointed, and sometimes, not here in my area, but sometimes figures or designs were carved at each end and along the sides of the dugout. I believe that was kind of a common practice up in the northwest part of the United States. The Indian of British Columbia and Alaska, as I was just saying, sometimes carved highly decorative totems on the prow of his boat. The dugouts often resembled the boats of the Vikings, and after the boat was finished, the inside was filled with water for several days to prevent it from warping. A dugout was often big enough to hold 60 people, but small dugouts were made to hold just one family, or 2 or 3 seamen. When traveling in a dugout, the men used carved wooden paddles, of course, and the graceful dugout, or pirogues, made by the Seminole Indians of Florida, had flat bottoms so that men and boys could stand in them and spearfish and alligators in the Florida swamps. Now, that's just a very brief outline of what this type of transportation was that they used. I've been showing you some images that I was able to acquire on the internet, but a fascinating mode of transportation, the dugout canoe. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I always enjoy getting together with you. I love you much on the other side of that monitor, and thanks for stopping by. And God willing, I will see you again real soon. See you later.